the weather, the neighborhood. Exactly the kind of conversation anyone else would expect. It should have felt normal. Instead, every word felt carefully measured. Daniel never noticed. Why would he? Trust has a way of making people feel safe. After lunch, the two men returned outside. I watched from the sink as they finished repairing the fence. When everything was done, Ryan loaded his tools into the truck. Before climbing inside, he glanced toward the house. Only for a brief moment. Then he drove away. That should have been the end of it. I wanted it to be. I told myself it had to be. Days turned into another week. Life slowly found its rhythm again. Or at least it appeared to. The distance between Ryan and me grew. No messages. No unexpected visits. No excuses to stop by. The silence should have brought peace. Instead, it left unanswered questions. One evening, while sorting through old photographs for our daughter's school assignment, I found a picture from a family barbecue 3 years earlier. Everyone was smiling. Daniel stood with one arm around me. Or perhaps the more honest question was whether I wanted to avoid seeing him at all. That evening, the family ate dinner together. Our daughter excitedly talked about a science project. Our son couldn't stop laughing about something that happened at school. Daniel listened to both of them with complete attention. Watching them, I couldn't help wondering how many families believed they were safe from heartbreak. Probably all of them. No one wakes up expecting their life to change. It happens quietly. One conversation. One decision. One moment that feels insignificant until you look back and realize it changed everything. Saturday arrived faster than I expected. By mid-morning, the sound of power tools echoed from the backyard. I looked through the kitchen window. Daniel and Ryan worked side by side, replacing broken fence boards and joking with each other. They looked completely normal. Like cousins spending the weekend together. Like family. Daniel laughed at something Ryan said. Ryan laughed too. Seeing them together filled me with a deep sense of guilt. Neither of them looked toward the house. I wondered if Ryan was avoiding the windows intentionally, or if he simply knew there was nothing either of us could say. Around noon, Daniel came inside carrying a toolbox. "We're taking a quick lunch break," he said. "Mind making some sandwiches?" "Of course." A few minutes later, Ryan stepped into the kitchen. He removed his work gloves and thanked me quietly. Our eyes met for only a second. Neither of us smiled. Neither of us acknowledged the tension hanging in the room. Instead, we talked about the fence. I remained standing at the window long after it was gone. My reflection stared back at me through the glass. A woman I barely recognized. How had everything become so complicated in such a short time? Just a few months ago, my biggest concerns were grocery lists, school schedules, and making sure everyone was home for dinner. Now every ordinary moment felt like a balancing act. One wrong step and everything could fall apart. I stepped away from the window and picked up my phone. No new messages. Part of me felt relieved. Another part felt strangely disappointed. That realization frightened me. I placed the phone face down on the kitchen counter as though hiding it would somehow silence the thoughts racing through my mind. The next few days settled into an uneasy routine. Daniel left for work every morning with the same warm smile. The kids hurried off to school. The house became quiet. And I did everything I could to stay busy. I reorganized closets, scrubbed kitchen cabinets, pulled weeds from the flower beds. Every task had the same purpose: to keep my mind occupied. But thoughts have a way of slipping through even the smallest cracks. Late Thursday afternoon, Daniel called. "Hey," he said cheerfully. "Ryan offered to help me fix the fence this Saturday. I told him we'd throw some burgers on the grill afterward." My grip tightened around the phone. For a moment I couldn't answer. "You still there?" "Yeah," I managed. "You okay?" "I'm just tired. You've seemed distracted lately." His voice wasn't suspicious. It was concerned. That somehow made it even harder. "I've just had a lot on my mind." "We'll get through it," he said gently. "We always do." After we hung up, I sat in silence. Saturday. That meant I would see Ryan again. Whether I wanted to or not. "Ryan, are you okay?" Just 4 words. Simple. Careful. Yet they carried the weight of everything neither of us had been brave enough to say. I stared at the screen for nearly 5 minutes. My fingers hovered above the keyboard. I typed. Deleted. Typed again. We can't do this. Delete. Please don't come over anymore. Delete. I'm fine. Delete. Every response felt incomplete. Eventually, I locked the phone without replying. Silence seemed safer than any words I could choose. But silence has a way of speaking louder than conversations ever can. The afternoon dragged on. I cleaned the kitchen twice. Folded laundry that had already been folded. Organized cabinets that were perfectly neat. Anything to keep my hands busy. Anything to stop thinking. Nothing worked. Every small task ended the same way. My thoughts always found their way back. By late afternoon, clouds had gathered outside. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The sound was strangely calming. I stood watching the backyard disappear beneath the steady drizzle. Then I noticed tire tracks forming in the wet driveway. A familiar pickup truck slowed in front of the house. My stomach dropped. It didn't pull in. It continued past. Only then did I realize I had been holding my breath. That frightened me more than anything else. Because some part of me had been waiting. And that was the truth I feared the most. The truck disappeared around the corner. The kids rushed downstairs moments later, arguing over cereal boxes and missing homework. Our daughter couldn't find her backpack. Our son insisted he'd already packed his lunch. The usual chaos unfolded exactly as it always had. For a little while, I almost convinced myself that normal life could drown out what had happened. It couldn't. After everyone finally left, the silence returned. I carried my untouched coffee into the living room. Morning sunlight poured through the windows, exposing every corner of the room. The couch looked perfectly ordinary. It was just another piece of furniture. Yet I couldn't bring myself to sit on it. Instead, I stood several feet away, folding my arms across my chest. How could one room hold so many memories at once? Children laughing during movie nights. Christmas mornings. Birthday celebrations. And now, a secret I wished I could forget. The doorbell startled me. My heart jumped. For one impossible second, I thought it might be Ryan. Instead, it was my neighbor, Melissa. She smiled warmly while holding an empty casserole dish. Thought I'd return this before I forgot. I smiled back, hoping my expression looked convincing. We chatted for a few minutes about the neighborhood, school events, and the weather. Ordinary conversations. Ordinary smiles. She had no idea I felt like my entire world was hanging by a thread. When she finally left, I locked the front door and leaned against it. The loneliness returned almost immediately. Around noon my phone buzzed. A single message. Pillow that didn't need adjusting. It was a pointless attempt to erase what couldn't be erased. Nothing looked different. Yet everything felt different. When I reached the staircase, I paused. The upstairs hallway was dark except for the small nightlight outside our daughter's room. I climbed each step carefully, listening to the familiar sounds of home. The soft hum of the air conditioner. A dog barking somewhere down the street. Daniel's quiet snoring coming from our bedroom. Life had continued as though nothing had happened. Only I had changed. Inside the bedroom, Daniel shifted slightly as I slipped beneath the blankets. Without opening his eyes, he reached over and wrapped an arm around my waist. It was something he'd done for years. An unconscious habit. A simple gesture of love. My chest tightened. I stared into the darkness, unable to close my eyes. Sleep never came. Instead, memories replayed over and over. Not because I wanted them to, but because my mind refused to let them go. By morning, exhaustion had settled behind my eyes. The alarm sounded at 6:30. Another ordinary weekday. Another routine waiting to begin. I walked downstairs and started the coffee maker. The familiar aroma slowly filled the kitchen. Normally it brought comfort. Today it only reminded me how ordinary everything looked compared to the storm inside my head. Daniel wandered into the kitchen a few minutes later, still half asleep. "Morning," he said with a tired smile. "Morning." He kissed my forehead while reaching for his favorite coffee mug. "You didn't sleep much, did you?" I forced a small laugh. "Just had a lot on my mind." He nodded without suspicion. "Work's been stressful for both of us lately." I let him believe that. Maybe because it was easier. Maybe because the truth would destroy more than just us. That conversation stayed with me much longer than it should have. After that day, our paths crossed more often. Sometimes he stopped by to return borrowed tools. Sometimes he helped Daniel with repairs around the house. Sometimes he simply happened to be nearby. Every visit felt harmless. At least that's what I kept telling myself. The dangerous part wasn't what we said. It was what remained unspoken. There were lingering glances, small pauses in conversations, moments where neither of us looked away as quickly as we should have. Nothing happened, but something had already changed. I began noticing little things. The sound of his truck pulling into the driveway. The way my heart reacted before my mind had time to remind me that this was wrong. I convinced myself I was imagining it, that I was simply lonely, that marriage naturally settles into routines after enough years. I buried those thoughts every chance I got, until the night everything became impossible to ignore. Standing there in the dim living room, I realized the line between harmless friendship and dangerous emotion had quietly disappeared. Neither of us had planned to cross it, yet somehow, we already had. And neither of us knew how to turn back. The silence lingered long after Ryan walked out the front door. I stayed where I was, staring at the handle as though it might somehow explain everything that had just happened. It didn't. The house was quiet again. Almost too quiet. For several minutes I couldn't bring myself to move. Every family photo hanging on the walls suddenly felt like an accusation. The smiling faces, the vacations, the birthday parties, the ordinary moments that had built a life over 16 years. All of it suddenly seemed fragile. I slowly crossed the living room, straightened the blanket on the couch with trembling hands, and adjusted That conversation stayed with me much longer than it should have. After that day, our paths crossed more often. Sometimes he stopped by to return borrowed tools. Sometimes he helped Daniel with repairs around the house. Sometimes he simply happened to be nearby. Every visit felt harmless. At least that's what I kept telling myself. The dangerous part wasn't what we said. It was what remained unspoken. There were lingering glances, small pauses in conversations, moments where neither of us looked away as quickly as we should have. Nothing happened, but something had already changed. I began noticing little things. The sound of his truck pulling into the driveway. The way my heart reacted before my mind had time to remind me that this was wrong. I convinced myself I was imagining it, that I was simply lonely, that marriage naturally settles into routines after enough years. I buried those thoughts every chance I got, until the night everything became impossible to ignore. Standing there in the dim living room, I realized the line between harmless friendship and dangerous emotion had quietly disappeared. Neither of us had planned to cross it, yet somehow, we already had. And neither of us knew how to turn back. The silence lingered long after Ryan walked out the front door. I stayed where I was, staring at the handle as though it might somehow explain everything that had just happened. It didn't. The house was quiet again. Almost too quiet. For several minutes I couldn't bring myself to move. Every family photo hanging on the walls suddenly felt like an accusation. The smiling faces, the vacations, the birthday parties, the ordinary moments that had built a life over 16 years. All of it suddenly seemed fragile. I slowly crossed the living room, straightened the blanket on the couch with trembling hands, and adjusted He's dependable, patient, the type of husband who never forgets birthdays, always fills my gas tank when it's low, and still tells me I'm beautiful even after long days when I barely recognize myself in the mirror. Together we have 2 incredible children. Our lives are ordinary in the best possible way. School mornings, weekend soccer games, parent-teacher meetings, family dinners, vacation plans scribbled onto calendars hanging beside the refrigerator. If someone had asked me 6 months ago whether I'd ever risk losing everything we built together, I would have laughed. I would have said absolutely not. Yet life has a strange way of changing direction before you even realize you've started walking down another road. The man standing near my front door wasn't a stranger. His name was Ryan. He was Daniel's cousin. Family gatherings were never complete without him. Every 4th of July he stood behind the grill flipping burgers while making everyone laugh. Every Thanksgiving he helped clean the dishes before anyone asked. When something broke around the house, Ryan somehow always knew how to fix it. Over the years he'd become part of our everyday lives. That familiarity became the very thing I never questioned. And maybe that's where everything began. It wasn't a dramatic moment. There wasn't lightning. There wasn't music. There wasn't some unforgettable movie scene. It started with ordinary conversations. One afternoon he helped me change a flat tire after I'd gotten stranded a few blocks from home. While waiting for roadside assistance that never seemed to arrive, we sat on the curb drinking bottled water and talking about nothing important. Work, the weather, the kids, life. For the first time in years, someone asked how I was doing, and actually waited for the answer. And something I had spent weeks pretending didn't exist. The living room felt different than it ever had before. This was the same room where birthdays had been celebrated, Christmas presents opened, and movie nights shared with the kids. Yet somehow that familiar space now felt unfamiliar, almost like we had stepped into someone else's life. Outside, the wind rattled the branches against the windows. Inside, neither of us dared to breathe too loudly. Finally he spoke. Maybe I should go. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I opened my mouth to agree. The words never came. Instead I looked away. That tiny hesitation said more than I wanted it to. He noticed. Of course he noticed. Over the past few months he'd learned to read every expression on my face, even the ones I tried to hide. For a long moment nothing happened. Then he slowly stepped backward toward the door. Relief should have washed over me. Instead, an unexpected emptiness settled in my chest. I hated myself for feeling it. Because none of this should have been happening. Not here. Not with him. Not ever. My name is Claire. I'm 38 years old. I've been married for nearly 16 years. My husband Daniel is the kind of man most people hope to find. Before we begin, welcome back to the channel. If you enjoy emotional true-style relationship stories filled with unexpected twists, difficult choices, and unforgettable endings, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Now let's get into today's story. The moment the door clicked shut behind us, the silence became impossible to ignore. The hallway faded into darkness, leaving only the faint glow slipping beneath the curtains in the living room. I stood frozen, my hand still resting against the edge of the doorway, unable to decide whether I should leave or stay. He didn't move any closer at first. Neither of us spoke. The quiet between us carried more meaning than any conversation we'd shared over the past several months. Every heartbeat felt louder than the last, filling the room with a tension that neither of us had expected to face. I should have walked away. I knew that. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was. His eyes searched mine as though he was waiting for me to make the decision he couldn't make himself. Neither of us did. It wasn't excitement that kept me rooted to the floor. It was confusion, fear, curiosity.